She told her friend all about King Xerxes. She described his lavish parties.
Ram, lamb, ham. Oh my.
She described his drunken follies.
Chardonnay, Cabernet, and whiskey.
But all of this frivolity wasn't impressive enough for King Xerxes.
We like to call her King Xerxes.
The king is a huge show-off, and he has a lot of wives. So nothing would do except to bring out all of his wives and parade them around.
Except he did bring out just one wife, Queen Vashti. Did he want her to dance? Wait on the men like a servant? What did he want her to do? Strut around with just her crown on? Not this.
Naomi stomped her foot, crossed her arms, and disgustingly shouted,
No. That's right. Queen Vashti said no. Smart woman.
Naomi and Ruby nodded in agreement. Queen Vashti was indeed a smart woman. She also was now a single woman. The king threw her out and decided he needed to make sure no other woman would ever say no to him. Just let Queen Vashti rot. And he immediately started looking for women who would do whatever he wanted.
Just say no. The king has got to go. Just say no. The king has got to go. Just say no. The king has got to go. Just say.
And what happened next? Well, that's a whole other story. But I say, Vashti was born for a time like this.
The woman who said no to a king. See, you probably won't find that version of the story in your Bible translation, but I have to admit, it's not that far off. Because yes, the book of Esther opens with a party that lasts 187 days. A king who's drunk with power and probably drunk on wine, and a queen who refuses to parade in front of his guests like a trophy, wearing possibly only a crown. It's absurd, it's theatrical, and you might think, surely this is satire and it didn't really happen, but then you remember things aren't all that different now. And yet, a woman says no and the empire trembles. A boundary is drawn and suddenly the system is exposed, because this story isn't just about a king and a queen, it's about power and resistance. And the moment Queen Vashti says no, everything shifts. She said, I will not be used, I will not perform, and I will not comply. And you think, of course, I would have said no too. But then you remember all the times you wanted to say no and didn't. So let me ask, when have you lost your boundaries in the name of being agreeable? When have you stayed silent because you didn't want to rock the boat? A couple of years ago, I was sitting on my back porch reading a book, and it was following a conversation I had with someone. We were talking about stress and busyness, and I'd really been struggling with not letting my boss get me really worked up. And they said, you really need to go get this book about boundaries and read it. So I did, and so I was sitting on the back porch, and the book was titled Boundaries: When to Say Yes, How to Say No to Take Control of Your Life. So I was sitting and reading it, and my neighbor came to the fence, and he was cleaning out his house and had some books and wondered if I wanted any of them. And he showed me a couple he had in his hands, And I knew instantly I was never going to read them, and so I said, sure, thanks so much. And he left his pile of books for me to do something with. And you can't make that up. And as he walked away, I realized even in this small moment, I struggled to say no. Because there's this deep fear in saying no, and it often revolves around our desires to be kind, or to want to be kind, compassionate, and faithful. And usually I equate these things with saying yes to what others ask of me. How many of you would say you struggle saying no to your boss, your friends, your kids, strangers, when you'd rather say no? When you know you should say no? Anybody? Yeah, okay. I had decided, as I guess many of you have, that saying no and setting limits wasn't loving. Now, there are also those of you who absolutely have no problem saying no and actually always say no first, or immediately think of all the reasons something won't work and why it's a no. And you know who you are, or at least the people around you do. Kids love the word no. It's one of the first signs they're learning they're their own person, and they're discovering their autonomy, that they're separate from others and can make their own choices. And it's important to allow children to begin to develop their own boundaries and teach them that they are in control of them. Maya often really doesn't want to get her diaper changed or her clothes on at night, and she doesn't just say no, she screams, arches her back, and refuses. Now, I could just hold her down and force her to get her diaper on, but what I do if I'm acting level-headed and don't yell back is that I ask her, would you rather sit in your bed or would you rather get dressed? And oftentimes she still refuses to get dressed, so I sit her in her bed, and sometimes this process takes a few minutes, but then usually she changes her mind and now she's ready to get dressed. And all of a sudden she said yes and is eager to get dressed, and it makes everything easier. But this is hers and mine boundaries interacting with one another. I'm respecting her no, but she must respect my boundary of the available choices, which don't include sleeping naked or in a dirty diaper. Right? Same is true for this infamous dilemma of making kids hug family members, right? Like, if you have affectionate kids, it's not as hard for them as certain kids, but there are times when any person knows that they don't really want to, when it's time to go, they don't want to give hugs. And I reinforce that that's okay, but we still need to come up with a way to say hi or bye to people that we care about. So give them a high five, blow a kiss. But when parents teach children that setting boundaries or saying no is bad, they are teaching them that others can do with it as they wish. To feel safe in our broken world, children, teenagers, adults need to have the power to say things like, no, I disagree. I choose not to. Please stop. That is wrong. See, in the physical world, boundaries are easy to see, right? Fences, signs, walls, manicured lawns, or hedges. Those are physical boundaries that show where my property ends and another's begins. And there are rules associated with these boundaries. Relational and intangible boundaries are just as real and just as important, but they are not always as easy to see. See, we all have skin as a physical boundary, but we also kind of have this invisible area around us where we don't rot people in, right? But boundaries shape how we spend our time, who we allow in, and what we tolerate. The other thing is, most of us don't walk around with a clear map of where our boundaries are. Sometimes we don't know we have one until someone crosses it, until we say yes too many times and then suddenly feel drained, resentful, or invisible. And if there was one area of community and relationships that it's really important for us to be healthy and work on, it's in the area of boundaries. And Queen Vashti and King Xerxes teach us about boundaries. See, we're not told explicitly why Queen Vashti refuses to come before all these rowdy and drunken men, but she draws a clear boundary and she refuses. There are two things worth noting after the queen says no that I want to lift up. One, the no cost her that relationship, her status, her well-being, her reputation. And in fact, at first, there seemed to be no point in her no. All the king did was get another woman. And others got really mad at her. Because see, when you have healthy boundaries, people with unhealthy boundaries are not going to like it. And they're going to be angry, and sometimes they're going to reframe it as you are in the wrong. When people cross a boundary and they treat us in a way that it is not acceptable, or we are asked to do something we don't want to do, we draw a boundary, and it may have consequences, and it may not be easy, and it may cost us a relationship. But if they are unwilling to respect our boundary, then what does that say? Because boundaries are a litmus test for the quality of our relationships. If they only love our yes and our compliance, they don't really love us. Now, before you think I'm giving you justification for saying no to everything we ask for your help with, here's the thing. Boundaries are not about just keeping the bad out and saying no. Our boundaries need to be flexible and permeable and have ways for the good to get in. If you build really high walls and you say no all the time, you also have boundary issues because it means you can't let things in. It means you can't take responsibility for our shared community. And it could mean that you think your boundaries are more important than others because it's always about the interplay of boundaries. The second thing worth noting about Queen Vashti's no and the story as it unfolds is the king is humiliated and angry. And so he immediately turns to his 7 legal counselors about what to do. And one of them says this, and I quote, "Not only has Queen Vashti done wrong to the king, but also to all the officials and all the people who are in the provinces of the king." See, now all the wives will begin to refuse their husbands, and it actually says there will be no end to their put-downs and arguments. In other words, if one woman says no, the whole system could fall apart. Suddenly, what began as a personal dispute has mushroomed into a political crisis. Suddenly, the king is not the only one humiliated by the queen's no. Every man in the empire has been offended. Her act of defiance, her willingness to create healthy boundaries of what she was unwilling to do, her powerful no put in motion the path that changed history. Because resistance spreads. That's why the king is afraid of resistance. That is why he must go to great lengths to try to discredit the person saying no, to try to punish them and use them as an example to instill fear. Because truth resonates even when it's hard to hear. Because courage gives others permission. Because silence breaks open when someone speaks. Because love wants to join love. When one person stands up to power, others often find their voice. When people see someone choosing truth over comfort or love over control, something sacred stirs in them. That's why I joined the trip to DC, because I got an invitation and I was inspired by others who had already been doing this, so I joined them. And it was contagious, and now I feel more committed than ever to this prophetic movement after being with people who came from all over. See, after reflecting on our trip to DC and our processional from a nearby church to the Capitol building, carrying 51 coffins, one for each state and one for the District of Columbia, each coffin covered in the statistics of the policy murder that was about to take place, as I reflected, why do it? Why participate? When the police were on the intercom asking us to get out of the street, giving us their official warning before they began to make arrests, asking us to stop praying, asking us to stop disrupting business as usual, because we were trying to honor the poor and the vulnerable, our no didn't stop the bill being passed. So why do it? When it may not actually change the outcome, why do it when the police are just going to go clear the streets and move on with their day? Why continue this movement committed to morality and justice now that the bill has passed? Just like Queen Vashti's no, it led her to be replaced with Queen Esther. Have you read the rest of the story? It's not a defeat because a resurrection is coming. See, when one person stands up to power like the queen did, others often find their voice, and every no spoken from a place of integrity becomes an invitation for someone else to do the same. That's how movements begin, not with the masses, but a few people saying no, a holy no. One of the things I love about our Seasons of Grace time is that we have a few minutes for some open dialogue, some response. And so I open it up to you both to share in conversation now, but hopefully you will continue to think and have conversation. Because this story of Queen Vashti invites us to both reflect on the quality of our personal boundaries, and it also invites us to reflect on the ways we can be a part of drawing boundaries in public for the sake of sacred community. Who knows, your no might be one that sets someone free. So how do you experience this story speaking to you on this day?
I was thinking while you were talking, I was raised to be nice, you know.
Yeah.
To be nice. And, you know, go along and get along and don't upset anybody. And I was that parent. And I just thought about it now, you know, if my kids didn't want to hug Great Aunt Gladys, I would make them do it anyway. So they wouldn't hurt Great Aunt Gladys's feelings. And I was just cringing. While you were talking, I was thinking, why did I expect my children to be the adults? You know, why couldn't Great Aunt Gladys just suck it up and deal with it? Hug her.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's my thought.
Yes, yes. Thanks for that.
I guess I was too, Louise, and it made me think, all the summers I worked at the Y summer camp, I always said, be sweet. And the kids, I would say, now wait a minute. They said, we know, be sweet. You know, they got tired of hearing that. It's
And it is important to be sweet and nice and be thoughtful of other people's feelings, right? But that's why it's complicated, because it's that interplay of people's boundaries. But you said it perfectly of, well, why didn't we ask the adult to be the adult? And respect somebody else's, actually, I don't feel like hugging right now. Yeah.
So one technique that I like, if someone approaches me with a request or a desire or whatever it is to try to become the observer. Because you want to observe their need, you want to observe their approach, you want to observe, you'll even observe your history with that person.
Mm-hmm.
But then you have to observe yourself. And you go, oh man, that made me feel sick to my stomach. I know I can't do that. Let's say no. Or that sounds really intriguing. Let's talk about what you're asking me to do.
Mm-hmm.
And just be the observer is a real cool personal assessment
Yeah,
to you.
very true. And to listen to our own bodies, observe others, and listen to ourselves, yes.
I think learning that sometimes loving people to enablement is a problem. Because I had to recently come to terms with that, where I was loving somebody so much that I realized I was enabling them to not better themselves and do better for themselves. And like having to realize that I'm not the parent to that person, I'm a friend to that person.
Yeah.
And they might want to be my child, but it is not my role to be their mom. And that's really hard because you know, they're like, well, don't you love me? Don't you care about me? If you love me, you do this. And you have to be firm, and sometimes it looks cruel, but it's like, this is not good for you. This is not good for me. And and the relationship fell apart, but it was like, this isn't, you can't love somebody into hurting themselves.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really easy to do when you want the best for them. But sometimes you have to realign on what does best look like.
sure. Yes, thank you for sharing that.
I guess you understand, Pastor, that sermons like this are challenging the entire Southern culture. So you may not have to deal just with Washington.
Bless your heart. You're right. It is. And that's the thing, right? And there are some great things about the Southern culture and the openness and the kindness and the willingness to offer, right? And it's never either or. It's both and. But it is countercultural, especially right now, right?
Carol Lee, I love the perspective. I've been going to lots of churches for lots of years with lots of male preachers. And I've never heard this scripture preached about that I recall. Maybe I wasn't paying attention, but I wasn't in the choir hall. But I can thank you. That perspective is so powerful, and I really appreciate that.
See, Esther shows up in the lectionary once every 3 years. And that's the book of Esther. Usually we talk about Queen Esther, and her story is great, and that's the rest of the story. But there's also this little part at the beginning. So.
Well, I think too, I remember we had a Bible study on Esther one time, and they talked about Queen Vashti. It wasn't just a no, there was also the threat that she might have been put to death for what she did, and it's sort of a quiet, undertone of what that no could have meant for her. And you think about people, I don't know, it makes me think about some of the early protesters, even in like World War II and the Nazi regime, and you hear about like the first people who were, state murdered basically for speaking out and saying no to what was going on and what was wrong. And so it adds a lot of weight to the fact that she said no, and she could have lost everything. So.
Yeah. The images that came to mind for me this week were, have you seen the clip of the surgical team that used their bodies as a physical barrier to letting ice come in mid-surgery?
Yeah.
Did you see the image of the woman? There was some, I don't even know what you call those big military vehicles, but they were parading into one of the farms. There was an image of a woman standing, like the bumper was right there, and she was standing in front of it in the middle of the road. Like sometimes our no's may feel like small, but sometimes we may be confronted with bigger ones, and there is a lot of weight. But if we can't say no to the person that comes with books that we don't want, I mean, I say that in jest because there's also some preparation that has to happen before we can be prepared to say no. And if that's probably the one thing that I've taken from listening to William Barber and some of this nonviolence movement. People didn't just decide to show up. There was a lot of internal work that had to happen, and training. They did training to be nonviolent, because not just anyone cannot blow their top when someone is confronting you with all kinds of stuff. So.
Yeah, Rosa Parks just didn't sit on that bus.
Yeah.
She knew what she was doing.
Right.
And coming from a person who has problems with boundaries lots of times, especially when it comes to certain people and things, I can relate to this. And I wanted, since you weren't here last week, I want to ask you this week. When you get done with this whole Season of Grace thing, are you going to put all these stories in a list for everybody to have? Because I would love to go back and have them as a reference. Because these are things you normally wouldn't hear about. And I just think they're pretty neat to know and to point out and to have it.
Yes.
So that's just me.
Yes, definitely.
I'm sitting here reading this, and the one thing I think is drawing boundaries can be very lonely, and very solitary, unless you have a community. So
Yes, definitely.
Well, I have a question. Like, I'm afraid to even go stand on the corner for that thing this Thursday. I feel like I have too much to lose. What if something happens and I get kicked out of my home?
Yeah.
You know,
Okay,
that's,
and that is a valid fear. And I want to say that when I don't mean to cut you off, but I want to say that it's valid to have fears and we all have different roles to play. So when I got on that bus, there was 35 of us from the Taylorsville area, from within driving distance. There were people from other places, but the bus that I was on from North Carolina, there were 7 of us that were arrested. And people showed up and were what we called moral witnesses. So not everything, I say that to say there's varying levels of what people put on the line. There were some teachers on the bus that knew that their jobs were being risked and they didn't participate in that part. So there's always ways to participate and not have to put your livelihood on the line. So that's important. And fear can be overcome with love. Like, we have to ground ourselves in love and not allow fear to just take hold. Now, that is not easy. I'm not saying that. But that is what we have to counter fear with, is this, like, we're in this together. We love one another. And at the end of the day, like, love is greater than fear. So I hope that you feel heard and challenged to, like, there's a part for you to play that doesn't have to involve risking where you live.
Yeah, and I don't think you should feel ashamed if you can't do it, because make sure that you're with an organized group that knows what they're doing, is what I would suggest if you have any fear at all. Because we had college kids when we did it, and some of the colleges supported, some didn't. The ones that didn't, that's why we were there, and they supported us, but they got out of the realm when we knew there was a possibility of arrest. So it's real, but don't feel bad if you can't do it. I mean, you can do things in other ways, so.
Definitely.
I think it's really important that you don't feel like you're not participating if you're not involved. But there are other ways, like they don't usually arrest people that are registering people, or it's people that are really holding their ground.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's always that chance, but it's really important to just kind of take note of the environment around you, because we were even banded. They knew who was willing to do civil disobedience and who wasn't, so.
I think sometimes it's even just the act of sharing your story to a group of people like this to then motivate somebody who feels like they can go and stand up for you. So it's like you being open and vulnerable and sharing, that takes bravery too. And so it can motivate the people who can go feel safe to stand on the corner.
Well, and holding those willing to go,
Yes.
you know, and praying for those folks is doing part.
Yep.
how do I stand my ground with my dad, for example? He called these immigrants criminals. I mean, and I can't engage because I'll cuss them out. We're not getting anywhere. I mean, I don't.
There's boundaries are probably the main thing we go to therapy and talk about, right? So like there's not like what this story is to do is to provide inspiration and challenge you, but it's also the work of us reflecting on what this looks like in our life, and it's an ongoing conversation. And so,
Let me interrupt you. Here's one thing my therapist said. Instead of saying all Trump voters are bad people or don't care about other people, whatever, take it on a case-by-case thing. Because I have dear friends who voted for him. And I'm not, right now, I don't feel like I need to cut off those relationships, but do it on a case-by-case
yes.
thing.
And I want to be clear, this isn't about partisan politics of
Yeah,
Democrat
sorry,
versus
just
Republican.
using that
What
as an example.
Oh, yeah, totally. I just want to say this is about right versus wrong. This is about morality.
Right.
And the church is always about right or wrong, irregardless of all of the, like, political organizations and all of that. I thank you for the conversation, and I hope that it continues. for our benediction. Go now and hear the stories your sisters and brothers want to tell.
For God may speak to us through them.
Dare to share yourself with all people that God loves.
That we may more fully understand each other.
The peace of God go with you and be shared through you.